For the sake of trying something a little different, I figured I would try talking over top of a time-lapse, the way a lot of art commentary channels tend to do it. For your information, the drawings you'll be seeing throughout this video are not mine, but are instead my copies of drawings from the first few issues of Death or Glory, which is illustrated by Bengal Graham. You can find him on Instagram. The topic of this video will be the 10,000 hour rule, where it comes from, as well as whether or not it's accurate. This video will also be mostly unscripted. I do have my jot notes here in front of me. Will I be able to stay on topic for the full 10 minutes or whatever it is? Let's find out. So, 10,000 hour rule. You've probably heard of it before. It does get tossed around quite a fair bit these days. It refers to the amount of practice theoretically required to become an expert at any given skill. What I don't think as many people are aware of is that the rule originates from Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers. In that particular chapter, Gladwell cites examples of Bill Joy, a prolific computer programmer who happened to have 24/7 access to the University of Michigan's state-of-the-art computer center, which was a very rare thing in 1971, as well as another expert programmer who you may have heard of by the name of Bill Gates, who experienced similar strokes of good luck while growing up. He also talks about the Beatles and how they were forced to play for 8 hours a day by a club owner in Hamburg, Germany, before seeing their first bout of real success as a band. Gladwell also goes on to describe other expert musicians such as Beethoven and how he was made to practice music and composing from a very young age. What all of these people have in common is that they all would have had approximately 10,000 hours of practice under their belt before becoming celebrities in their chosen fields. I think this 10,000 hour rule is the reason why young artists will often hear from professionals that they need to be putting in like 10-hour days every day in order to make it as an artist, which I think is misleading at best and harmful at worst, because it's not realistic. And honestly, if the only way that you're seeing progress in your own work is by putting in 8 to 10-hour days, then it means you're not practicing efficiently. Now, it's no question that becoming exceptionally skilled at something requires a lot of effort and a lot of time. However, the issue that I have with the 10,000 hour rule is that it assumes that all of these people spent all 10,000 of those hours challenging themselves and deliberately and consciously improving at their craft. But there's no way for us to know that for sure, right? Like, we can't delve into the heads of these people and examine what they were doing or thinking during all of those practice sessions. Let's say you work an 8-hour shift at your job. Regardless of what that job is, only some of those hours are going to be very stressful and demanding, while the other hours are going to be fairly uneventful, laid back, almost boring. And it's the really challenging moments in which you learn the most, because there's a difference between active and passive learning. One is much more effective than the other. The point I'm getting at with this is that 4 hours of focused and deliberate practice is going to get you a lot farther than, say, 8 hours of mindlessly doodling in a sketchbook. To use myself as an example, I'd say on average, I only draw for about 1 to 2 hours a day. My reason for this is because, at least from my experience, I found that 3 hours is about the maximum amount of time that your brain can spend absorbing new information before it just taps out. So in other words, any hours past that point is just diminishing returns. And the other reason being that I'm kind of lazy. But damn, 10 hours a day, that's insane. Like, when do you eat? How many hours of sleep are you getting a night? That's another thing. because sleep is what helps transfer short-term memories into long-term ones. If you've ever stayed up trying to cram for a final exam before, you'll know that it doesn't really work. Even if you actually remember anything from that cram session, by the time you sit down to write it, you'll remember it just long enough to finish the test, and then you forget it instantly. So, what was the point? I've come to think of drawing as being similar to weightlifting, but for your brain, because it is a very mental skill. And let's be real, no one's spending 8 hours in the gym. You'll hear a lot of professional bodybuilders saying that the best way to accelerate muscle growth is through short periods of high-intensity training. So, lifting far more what you think you're capable of for a very short amount of time, and then you rest. Which is why the approach I take with my own studies is high intensity and low duration, because it's more efficient, and it'll probably get you better results in the long term anyways. And anyone who works out regularly will also have recovery days, right? Maybe one day you did upper body, so today is leg day, etc. I like to approach drawing the same way. Maybe I worked extra hard yesterday, so I'm just gonna take it easy today. It's supposed to be enjoyable. I don't want it to become a chore. And unlike being an athlete, you don't have to retire by the time you're 30. Art and drawing should be a lifelong pursuit, and yet people will treat it like a 100-meter dash when they should be treating it like a marathon. You gotta pace yourself. No sense burning yourself out before you've even hit your prime. But hey, if you're able to put in 8 to 10 hour days without ruining yourself physically and mentally, then go for it. But I personally think it's stupid advice and I don't recommend it. I've been drawing seriously for the past 10 years or so, but in terms of total hours spent drawing, I'm probably only about halfway to 10,000. I'm maybe at 5,000 hours, because I know for a fact I was not putting in 1,000 hours a year, because especially when I was younger, I wasn't necessarily drawing every day, and there's been multiple instances where a week will go by without me actually drawing anything. So it may even be lower than 5,000. I'm maybe at 4,000 hours, and yet I'm capable of drawing at a professional level. I'm not claiming to be an expert at what I do. That would be a pretty major exaggeration. But in terms of just pure drawing ability, I'm good enough at it. It's really just the technical aspects of industry jobs that, I guess, intimidate me. And had I known what it meant to study effectively back when I first started, then I would have been even farther along than I am now with the same amount of hours. So it also depends on what your goals are. If your goal is simply to be good enough that other people will be willing to pay you for a service, then you can get away with probably a quarter of 10,000 hours. I think 2,500 would more than suffice to get your career started if that's what you're aiming for. And then at that point, if you do intend on doing it professionally, you're inevitably going to spend a lot of time doing it, so the number of hours under your belt becomes arbitrary. It's not like once you hit that magic number, a buzzer goes off in your brain like, well, I'm an expert now, so time to throw in the towel, I'm done, I'm finished. No, you keep doing it. No one's actually keeping track of their hours, because it's something they want to do. Setting specific goals for yourself will also help you progress more quickly. I, for example, have chosen to focus mostly on line art without any kind of rendering or shading, because that's specifically what I want to be good at. I don't really care so much about making things look really pretty. I just want my drawings to look believable and structurally sound. There's this video that was doing the rounds within the art community a while back of Pewdiepie learning to draw by drawing every day for 100 days. So that's what, 3 months? And I'm not normally one to watch Pewdiepie's content, but when I heard about this one, I'm like, yeah, I'll check it out. And it was actually pretty chill. It was just him documenting his progress and being honest about whatever mistakes he made along the way, and it's just a nice short video. And I look at the comments and I see people saying things like, "Oh, he's so talented," or "I'm so jealous because it took me twice the amount of time to get that good." Am I surprised that he made the amount of progress that he did in that amount of time? No, I'm not, because he went into it with a specific goal in mind. He went into it saying, okay, I want to be able to draw an anime girl from the shoulders up. And I'm not making fun of him or anything. I think it's a perfectly reasonable goal to have as a beginner. Because he went into it with intention, he improved very quickly at that particular thing. And now if he chooses to continue doing it, he can move on to focusing on the rest of the body or tackling other subject matter if he wants. So I think it just serves as another good example of knowing what you want to get out of study sessions. If you're not going in with a plan, then it's going to be more difficult to orient yourself, especially if you're trying to learn multiple different things at once. Going back to Gladwell's book, in a previous chapter he talks about how hockey players born within a certain month are automatically placed at a disadvantage in comparison to other players simply because of how cutoff dates for hockey programs are arranged, and that they'll end up being placed in teams with players who are nearly a year older than them, which is a big deal when you haven't even turned 10 yet, and so on and so forth. But unlike a lot of sports, and the example of Bill Joy and his computer center, what I really like about art and drawing is the accessibility of it. You don't need any special equipment, you don't need anyone's permission, you can just start. You can go get yourself a crappy dollar store sketchbook and some pens and look up a tutorial or just draw stuff in front of you, and you can just start putting in those hours today if you really wanted to. Granted, it does make a difference if you have access to things like a drawing tablet or a quiet place in which to study without being interrupted. I'm not denying that, but for the most part it's a low bar for entry. There's no cutoff dates. Anyone who wants to start making things can do so whenever they want, and I think that's pretty nifty. So, do you need to have 10,000 hours under your belt in order to qualify as a god-tier artist? Not necessarily. It depends on what your study sessions look like. It could be more or less depending on how efficient you are. I would say 10,000 is a bit overdramatic. I think 8,000 hours would qualify someone as being expert level, but there have been people who have been drawing for decades who never really improve all that much because they're not drawing with enough intent, whereas some people will draw for half the amount of time and make a huge amount of progress. Either way, drawing is hard, it's not going to happen overnight, so be lenient with yourself. Be patient. You should be putting in those hours where you can, but there's no sense in killing yourself over it. I like this format because I can get some drawing practice in and put out a video at the same time. Everyone wins. Thanks for watching, and let me know your thoughts in the comments.